think for me, I fell in love so much with Jameson and the Irish whiskey. And I've tried other Irish whiskeys outside of Jameson, Sexton, Slane, Proper 12, all that good stuff. I love Irish whiskey. I know this is about bourbon, but I love Irish whiskey. Shout out to Jameson. And so, but I think it's because Irish whiskey, and for those of you who don't know, is triple distilled. And there's a joke that they say at the distillery tour, it's to be sure, to be sure, to be sure. That's why they triple distill it. And but what that really means for me is that it's smooth, it's easy drinking. That's why I love Weller. That's why I also like the Master's Keep 17 year and amongst other bourbons. But you both are really about the flavor and the notes. So can you talk a little bit about what your favorite flavors are, what you look for in a bourbon, what you think makes a good bourbon? And, you know, some people, when they see the proof, I think that they think one thing, oh, that's going to be too hot, that's going to be too spicy, but that's not always the case. So talk a little bit about that.
As far as the flavors that I really look for, well, first, before I get into that, I want to say that like my favorite, like everyday release, like every year, there's something that comes out that's not a one-time only release, is the Russell's 13. So
Sure.
like,
yeah.
You know, that I want to put out, I wanted to put out that before, but I'll digress. As far as the flavors though, that I really look for when I taste a bourbon that I really enjoy is that sweet oak flavor. That's really one of my favorites. It's something about a bourbon that's aged 12, 13, 15, 17 years that just has this unbelievably nice sweet oak flavor. And then it usually brings out a kind of a cherry flavor, that stone fruit flavor of like, and if it leans towards cherry, I really, really like that. Those are kind of my go-tos where I'm like, this is really, really good. I do love the caramels, like caramel's great, and vanillas. Sure. But like those are kind of in every bourbon. A caramel and vanilla is kind of a consistent flavor in most bourbons. But like if it has that sweet oak, the caramel, that cherry, and the vanilla, that's just heaven for me.
Yeah. What about you, Mike?
For me, you know, Johnny turned me on to the Russell's 10, and you know, fortunately for me, he was already well into his bourbon experience when he started to get me acclimated. So I was fortunate enough to skip a lot of the bottom of the barrel, the middle of the road, and just jump right into the upper echelon to define my palate and figure out what was right for me. So my first couple bottles of my own were the Bullet, the Russell's 10, and then it took me forever to find, but I did find some Russell's single barrel over at Harry's Beast Liquors on Ridge Road in Hobart, Indiana. So I immediately scooped up all of the Russell singles barrels from Harry that he had. I probably bought like 6 on my first get, which got me my bourbon number. So I was able to start getting points. And then I cracked it open and I text messaged this guy like, this is freaking hot. What are you telling me? Why are you telling me to buy this $70, $80 bottle that's hot as hell? Like, what is going on? And he's like, okay, back off a minute. If you think that's hot, continue to sip on the Russell's 10. When you no longer think the Russell's 10 is hot, revisit that single barrel. So it took me maybe a couple weeks or so to get acclimated to the Russell's 10, and he's right. Then from there, I was able to bump it up to that Russell single barrel, and then it wasn't so hot anymore. From there, you know, fast forward a couple months, I'm into Wild Turkey, Russell's, and chasing all those Sazerac bottles, right? So Buffalo Trace, Weller, E.H. Taylor, Eagle Rare. That's primarily what I'm doing. If it's not a Sazerac, it's a turkey. In that intermittent time, though, we had actually had my first trip to Kentucky. And then when we went to Kentucky, we went to Heaven Hill experience. We went to Evan Williams experience. We went to Jim Beam. We went, what was the other one we went to? Four Roses. Yep. And then Woodford. And then we visited Wild Turkey and we visited Lux Row. So then that was able to expand my profile even more. And then from there, I started to venture a little bit away from Johnny's palate and just coming more into my own. And while Russell's and Wild Turkey will always hold a special place in my heart, where Johnny gravitates to those oaky flavors, I actually prefer the caramel and the vanilla. And that actually guided me towards Heaven Hill. So Elijah Craig barrel proof, Larceny barrel proof, Bernheim barrel proof. Those are probably, even though they're all hazmat bourbons, those are probably my go-to sippers if I'm going to sip on something that night. Even Quality House from Heaven Hill. I shit you not. I will mix a little bit of my $8 Quality House with a little bit of my Elijah Craig barrel proof to tame it down. Or if I just wanted a decent glass pour, but I didn't want to pour all of my Elijah Craig barrel proof, because at the end of the day, it still is an allocated bottle. I will blend that a little bit with my Quality House to still give me my palate profile, my flavor profile that I've been accustomed to on my own now.
Yeah, and I actually I love Heaven Hill as well. I mean, Heaven Hill is probably my second favorite distillery, and I agree. Like the Elijah Craig barrel proofs and the Larceny barrel proofs. The Bernheim barrel proof was impressive, even though it's a wheat whiskey, not a bourbon. It still really was impressive that they came out with that. I mean, the Old Fitz, the McKenna 10-year. I mean, all of those are so good. It's wild how good the Heaven Hill profile is, and like you said, the Quality House, the bottom shelf bourbons that Heaven Hill produces are all amazing for the price. I mean, for $15, you can get a bottled in bond JW Dant.
Yep.
It's like, and it tastes like decent Heaven Hill. It's not awesome. It's not like this is the best thing you've ever had, but it's good for $15. It's really good, and it's not going to make you sick. I mean, it's a big deal. Like when you have a full spectrum, they have a very nice full spectrum like Turkey does, where they have that low end where it's really good at the low end, but it's also really, really good at the high end.
Yeah. And then to expand on that a little bit, I was recently listening to the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. Love the guys, but they spent a whole podcast on why do we promote bottom barrel bourbon. There's enough higher end bourbon out there as to why are we promoting bottom end bourbon. And I feel like, well, the answer to that, guys, is because some people are entering the game, and some people entering the game don't want their first bottle to be a $90 barrel proof. They want their first bottle to be a $15 to $30 bottle. And if you only have $15 to $30 to spend, Heaven Hill and Wild Turkey is where to spend your $15 to $30.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. And I'm glad that you said that too, because yeah, sure, there's higher end, there's more rare bourbons. There's always going to be another bourbon to chase after or a price point to chase after. But yeah, when you're talking about being economical, because not everyone, let's be honest, can afford, $100 bottles, $200 bottles, whatever, reviewing, I think, these other bottom barrel, if that's what they want to call it, bourbons, I think is important, because you can find a good bourbon for $30 or less. I remember my Aunt Michelle, when she was getting me into wine, she was like, I can show you some of the best wines for like $10 and under. Not all great, bottles of wine have to be 30, 40, $50. And I think that's true with bourbon too. You just have to know where to look. So I think it's important that, you kind of have an all over the place review from bottom to middle shelf to top shelf. Speaking of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail too, since both of you guys have gone now a couple of times, aside from Wild Turkey, just because, there's some bias there with it being your number one favorite distiller, what would you say on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, especially for those who have yet to experience it, was your favorite tour or experience?
Ooh, so that's a two-part answer for me. As far as history goes, I loved the Buffalo Trace E.H. Taylor tour. Who would have thought history could be so much fun? And I wish I didn't have 5 shots to take after that tour, to where maybe I remember a little more about that history, but top notch for sure. In addition to that, would probably for me, Jim Beam. Yeah. Jim Beam was not on my radar before we went to Jim Beam. Obviously Johnny's palate's profound, so he has all the Knob Creeks and he has everything that I didn't even know was made by Jim Beam in the first place. So my main goal when we went to Jim Beam was specifically to get this lineage bottle. It's a 15-year-old Jim Beam bourbon. And we got there early in the day before our tour even started, and we both obtained that bottle. So like for me, as far as there goes, boom, mission accomplished. And I told Johnny that day, hey, this bottle is really expensive. I'm not buying another bottle from Jim Beam today. I'm just not.
Yeah.
Well, after our tour, there's a couple cool highlights in the tour if you had never done it. One, if you guys have never watched the Neat bourbon video on Hulu, hosted by Freddie from Buffalo Trace, I suggest watching that. It's a cool 40-minute watch. It's definitely worth every minute. From there, they do a couple of things with the distillate. I was able to take those notes from that video and apply them to my Jim Beam tour. They had let a lady pour the distillate into the barrel, and she didn't turn the nozzle off quite quick enough. So the distillate actually started to spill over the barrel from that point. So the tour guide was actually nice enough to let us all touch the distillate. So where most people were just touching it and smell it, I went and did the neat thing where I got my hands basically soaked in it, did the clap, rubbed it, smelled, did the clap, rubbed it, smelled, did the clap, rubbed it, smelled again. And everything from that video that I watched was true to be made. And in case you don't know why you're doing a clap, back then, before they had technology, that was pseudo how another distiller tried to figure out how your mash bill was made. The first one's going to give you the profile, I want to say, and the second one's going to give you the ingredients.
There was proof, profile.
Yeah, and I'm going to butcher it. So go back and watch the video, but it works is the point of that. And then from there, we were immediately able to go into a second room. The gentleman asked for any volunteers. Me, Johnny, another guy, hurry up, raise their hand. So then they called us to the front. And the second thing they said was another volunteer. Well, I daydreamed, and Johnny and the other guy quickly raised their hand. And I was like, oh, shit. Now they got to hold the barrel, and I got this cup. What am I doing with this cup? I'm not really even part of this anymore. Well, little did I know that Johnny and this other volunteer were going to rotate this barrel, and that barrel was going to baptize me. Like, it wasn't a splash of bourbon. I was
it's all over,
pelted with this bourbon.
All over his arms.
It was honestly one of the coolest experiences I ever had. I'm over here like, I don't normally touch my fingers. I'm not one of the guys that licks their fingers after eating barbecue ribs. But in this instance, it smelled so delicious. I did not want any of it to go to waste. So I licked my hands. As I'm licking my hands, the tour guide's like, whoa, easy there. I'm going to pass this cup around. And even though nobody's supposed to drink out of it, I'm going to look the other way. So if anybody takes a little taste title, no harm, no foul. So this bottle, I told myself in my head, if I'm the last person to be able to touch the bottle. So I told myself, if this cup gets back to me and there's not a sip out of it, I'm going to chug this. I'm going to chug it all. So needless to say, it made its way back to me and nobody touched it. So I looked to the guy next to me and I'm like, hey, bro, I'm going to drink this. If you want to taste, you need to let me know because I'm going to chug it. He's like, no, I'm good. So as I'm drinking it, he's like, actually save me a taste. So I cut halfway through, I passed it to him. And with my intentions of only leaving with that lineage bottle, I was mind blown by what we just tasted. And I told John after we met we did that experience that I needed this bottle. I need this bottle. We're leaving with this single barrel. Little tidbits. As they pour the bottle, there's a cheese grate underneath. All the excess overflow goes into this cheese grate, and they say none of it is wasted. So in the next room, you rinse your bottle out. Now, we did the Heaven Hill experience where we rinse the bottle out. It's with water. Over here, you're actually rinsing it out with bourbon. So there's no even little bit of cutting down involved when that bottle gets filled up with the bourbon. I don't 100% know, but in my notion, I imagine that spillage went into that cheese grate, and that's the bourbon you're washing the bottle out with. Yeah. I asked him, I'm like, you didn't drink it? That bottle went around the whole room. Nobody tasted it yet. And he tells me, what did he tell me?
I go, I saw 3 people with their finger in it. So
oh my God. I'm like, thank God I didn't see that. I didn't know everybody's over here finger distilling.
Like, I don't want nobody's fingers in my bourbon. But it was a Knob Creek 9-year single barrel 120 proof straight out of the barrel is what he got to taste. And it was, I wish I would have gotten to taste it before the fingers touched it, because it really it was one of those things. It's like the germaphobe in me was like, why did you stick your finger in my bourbon?
Honestly, I'm glad I was daydreaming until I didn't realize that, because me tasting it was the decision maker on us purchasing that bottle, which was a really cool experience. Totally different than Heaven Hills. Heaven Hills, you pull a lever, you fill it up. They say it's a bottle your own bottle at Jim Beam, but it's more like an introductory to the assembly line. So you go there, you'll rinse out your own bottle, then it goes on a conveyor belt. It fills itself up. A young individual will dip it into the black wax. I feel like the only reason why we're not able to dip it is because Maker's Mark has a patent on the drips. So if it were to drip a certain way, they wouldn't be able to proceed forward with that bottle. But after they dipped it, we were able to take our thumbprints and put our thumbprint actually in the bottle.
Oh, cool.
We didn't even know this, but when we got upstairs, we were actually to get our name engraved on the bottle. So I did one, Bourbon Trail 2023, Mike Verdusco, Johnny and I, and he did one, Bourbon 2023, Rockstar Johnny and I, Mike Verdusco on the bottle. But so coincidental, because if we didn't get volunteered to get that barrel poured on us, we would have never have tasted the barrel to the point where I wouldn't have advocated to do the bottle, because we had already had in our mind that we were happy with the lineage bottle.
Yeah.
So it's really neat the way karma worked out on that one.
Part 4 coming at you tomorrow.